Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Ashley Sarpong, and today I'll be sharing from the opening chapter of my book project, Shakespeare and Environmental Justice: Engaging Eco-Criticism in the Student-Centered Classroom. This project explores how Shakespeare can be taught in ways that don't just emphasize ecology in general, but also take seriously the uneven and unjust ways environmental crises affect different communities. In this book, I propose a framework that weaves Shakespearean literature together with environmental justice, with the goal of empowering students to connect ecological issues to histories of race, colonialism, and capitalism. As the climate emergency forces us to think across disciplines, Shakespeare offers fertile ground for asking, how have narratives of land, power, and human non-human relations shaped the world we inhabit? And how might students use Shakespeare as a resource for envisioning more equitable futures? My framework emphasizes student-centered project-based learning. Students don't just analyze Shakespeare, they also make connections between early modern texts and present-day activism, between storytelling and social change. Chapter 1, from which we get the title of this talk, Developing a Shakespearean Pedagogy for Environmental Justice, asks what does Shakespeare pedagogy look like in a time of climate crisis? Recent scholarship has taken what we might call an ecocritical turn, examining storms in King Lear forests and As You Like It, or islands in the Tempest. These approaches have been valuable, but they often stop short of grappling with environmental justice, defined by Adamson and colleagues as, quote, the right of all people to share equally in the benefits bestowed by a healthy environment, end quote. My goal is to show how eco-critical and anti-racist approaches can come together to create a pedagogy that is both attentive to Shakespeare's ecological imagination and responsive to the lived realities of environmental inequality. Environmental justice, as the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency defines it, means, quote, the just treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in activities that affect human health and the environment, end quote. The word just is crucial here. Climate change, food scarcity, pollution, these are not evenly shared problems. They fall hardest on communities of color, indigenous peoples, and the poor, who have borne the brunt of crises produced by colonial and capitalist systems of extraction. So, at the heart of my project is a dual commitment: building ecological literacy while also practicing anti-racist pedagogy. The key question environmental justice asks is, who is harmed? And for us as educators, that question needs to shape how we teach Shakespeare. Let's now turn to what's already happening in Shakespeare eco-criticism and pedagogy. Emma Watson's Green Shakespeare course, for example, connects Shakespeare to sustainability by combining close reading with service-based service learning projects. Catherine Brokaw's Shakespearean Yosemite initiative brings students into the national park to perform ecologically inflected adaptations, combining theater, community engagement, and ecological education. Scholars like Lynn Bruckner have argued that teaching Shakespeare eco-critically requires risk-taking, stepping outside of the safety of familiar methods, as seen in the above two examples. Additionally, Claire Hansen emphasizes place-based pedagogy, showing how Shakespeare can be taught alongside local environments, and LaRoche and Monroe advocate for collaborative classrooms that resist academic isolation and instead model ecological interconnection. These approaches demonstrate the vitality of Shakespearean ecocriticism, but they also show its limits. With the exception of Brokaw's work in the San Joaquin Valley, where environmental justice is a lived reality, most models emphasize ecology without fully addressing inequity. Here, Rob Nixon's concept of slow violence is useful. As Kate Cairns mobilizes this term in a pedagogical context, she distinguishes between pedagogies of immediacy and pedagogies of excavation. Pedagogies of immediacy mobilize quick feel-good actions, like a one-day cleanup project, that create a sense of personal accomplishment but risk glossing over deeper structural issues. By contrast, pedagogies of excavation dig into historical and systemic injustices, asking students to confront racism, colonialism, and capitalist exploitation as drivers of ecological harm. These pedagogies channel difficult emotions, anger, grief, frustration into collective visions for long-term change. This distinction maps onto our Shakespeare pedagogy. Are we content with symbolic readings of storms and forests, or do we challenge students to excavate how Shakespeare's plays reflect and reproduce structures of inequity that persist today? One way I put this concept of environmental justice in pedagogy into practice is through teaching The Tempest. Traditionally, this play has been read through a post-colonial lens, but when we add environmental justice, we see new dimensions. In Act 1, we begin with a shipwreck, a moment of environmental catastrophe that produced panic and distress unevenly among social classes. Ariel is mobilized as an instrument of environmental harm, while Caliban's connection to the island becomes the fulcrum of Prospero's control. In Act 2, Gonzalo's utopian vision parodies colonial fantasies, while Caliban offers a local subjugated knowledge of the island, an alternative ecological perspective. In Act 3, we examine Caliban's costuming in different productions, asking how performance choices shape the racial and ecological othering in his character. We also read Ariel's Three Men of Sin speech as a critique of pastoral imagery, where, unlike the typical pastoral, human actions directly cause ecological upheaval. In Act 4, the mask invokes agricultural abundance, political alliance, and colonial projection, as Prospero imagines the island as a pastoral stage for his power. And finally, in Act 5, Prospero's renunciation of magic and subsequently his control of nature returns him to political authority. Ariel is freed, but Caliban's fate remains uncertain. Does he regain his land or remain dispossessed? Through these acts, students see how the Tempest stages not only ecological themes, but also colonial violence, dispossession, and unequal access to land and survival. This is where eco-criticism and environmental justice meet. Let me conclude by saying that the urgency of climate change requires us as educators to connect literature to the lived realities of ecological crisis. Environmental justice reminds us that those crises are not neutral, they disproportionately affect marginalized communities. Teaching Shakespeare from this perspective enables students to connect canonical texts with issues of racial capitalism, colonization, and inequality. It repositions Shakespeare as not only or not simply a monument of the past, but as a living tool for imagining just and sustainable futures. Ultimately, my project offers a framework and toolkit for guiding students to see Shakespeare and early modern literature more broadly, not as relics, but as resources for engaging the most pressing issues of our time. Thank you.